alive.
We're live indeed. Welcome back. It's good to always be here. We're locked in, you're locked on, we're live, and this is Misaligned. Tonight we're talking about the manosphere, toxic masculinity, bits around capitalism, and the modern gender war. I did not envision this being a conversation that we're going to have because this is not something I'd even imagine would be a crisscross or a mishmash. Well, thank you, Jab. Because Jab, you always come up with the most interesting ideas around how we can actually assess different kinds of conversations and topics. The usual conversation is quite predictable, but we're not having that now. One side says men are lost because feminism went too far, women became too independent, dating apps, they've ruined relationships, society stopped respecting masculinity, blah, blah, blah. The other side says the problem is toxic masculinity, patriarchy, male entitlement, and men are refusing to adapt to the new world, how things are working. So everybody's just fighting, essentially. Today I'm asking a slightly different question. What if both sides are diagnosing symptoms but missing the structure underneath? Young men are dealing with loneliness, rejection, and not even just young men. And this is just the truth. They're older men as well. Men in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even dealing with these things. Um, Dating frustration, loss of purpose, housing pressures, money pressures, collapse in the old provider role as what it was back in the day. Young women are dealing with their own version of the same broken system. Safety concerns, beauty pressure, fertility pressure, motherhood penalties, work pressure, dating fatigue, and the expectation to be independent while still being desirable, which is quite, again, it's an interesting dynamic when you look at both sides of the equation. So maybe the real question is not whether or not men or women are the problem. Maybe the real question is whether capitalism has turned love, sex, family, status, masculinity, femininity, relationships, etc., into markets where everyone feels like they're losing. This is how I've interpreted the conversation that we're going to have. And tonight, I think what we're asking is the manosphere a diagnosis or is it a distraction? Is toxic masculinity a real explanation, or does it ignore why so many men feel lost? Has dating become an economy, and are men and women really fighting each other or fighting capitalism through each other? This is gender wars, not class wars. A Marxist take on the manosphere. I think what will be interesting is to hear your opening statement, Jab. Just your initial thoughts about this particular conversation.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction. So I'll start with a quick position or summary, and then we can develop that later. So my assessment is that the gender wars are a symptom of late stage capitalism. In other words, the problems that men or feminists identify, I'm not arguing that they are imagined. These things are real. In the same way, the red pill manosphere, the issues that they talk about, those issues are real. But I think that both camps misdiagnose the problem. So the feminists see men as the eternal problem, and in the manosphere, they speak of women as the problem. And I think that that is misplaced. I think that to understand the issues that they talk about, you have to talk about, consider the material conditions. What are the material conditions that lead to the symptoms, to the issues that they rightly observe, and how can we better understand that? So that's my argument.
Sorry. Yeah, Obi, you want to go?
Yeah, nice one. Thank you for having me again on this podcast, Mr. Line.
Always good to have you, man. It's
Yeah,
conversations. We're just having
I'll
misaligned
tell you,
conversations, man.
and the thing with me is this: I'm a very fan of not trying to use. I know no shade to anyone, but I like to keep my words simple. I know Sabi is
Mm.
big grammar, even though say I can, but I like to just keep it simple so that the average everyday person, even the market seller or the vulcanizer, we just tune in would still understand because I like to carry everyone along. So just bear with me from time to time. I'll be speaking in a local Nigerian pidgin English because Akati, as I'm an advocate of Nigeria should be speaking pidgin English at
Be now.
people
You
so
do
everyone can understand. So the question, what's the question again? Diagnosis. Did you ask a question before this, or can we just dive in straight?
dive straight in. Go for it. I mean, there's a question, but I mean, to be honest, it's more about
Yeah.
just.
So you see, we live in a capitalist world. First of all, to start with, we live in I think I don't need to explain to anyone that cash rules everything around us. I mean, even if you don't want it to, that's how it is. And the people that have somehow managed to put themselves in the niche of the capitalists that control the capital market that controls the world, they've done a very good job of knowing how to, rule that whole dimension themselves and control it. And one of the things about this manosphere thing is it did not start overnight. You see, the red pill movement did not start overnight. It was something that has started as a result of accumulated distrust, from as far back as the 1970s when the welfare came in and kicked the man out of the house, started supporting the women, giving them that power.
Sorry, okay. I just thought about something. I think we jumped straight into talking about the red pill manosphere. Maybe in the interest of clarity, maybe if you don't mind, just kind of describing what it is or just telling us what it is. Because I think
No, are you serious that people don't know what the red pill manosphere is? Is that what I mean?
No, but yeah, I mean, it's a very valid, and I think I'll come in here and say yes, it's a valid challenge, and I think it's worth explaining. And I would probably try to give my own description of what the red pill or what the manosphere is. I think. Hold
yes.
on. I'll give my own opinion about this one. I think the red pill is a very, very generic definition that's applied to knowledge. Red pill essentially means it comes from the Matrix, where the movie where you had the red pill, you had the blue pill, and the red pill required you knowing things about the world that you would not know any other way. And those things that you knew took you down to a different path, to ultimate knowledge about the most grotesque things about society that you could ever possibly know. The blue pill was more about just ignoring all of that and just living in a world where that knowledge was not something that you would deal with. You just deal with no knowledge and just assume that everything is fine. Um, the manosphere is slightly different. It's more of an offshoot, in my opinion, of the red pill. The manosphere talks about how we're focusing on men's issues and how men are being not weak, but the conversation, I'm taking that from that conversational
Yeah.
element of focusing on what men's experiences are in the world and how men view the world, how men experience the world, and what happens to men. That's all that the manosphere is, in my own opinion. Now, there are segues, which we're probably going to go into that in some parts of this conversation as well, which are extremist expressions of both the red pill and the manosphere. But I think these general definitions kind of give us a standard grounded view about what the red pill and what the manosphere are.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Of course. I mean, what you said makes absolute sense because I was going to get to how the red pill, how the manosphere was an offshoot of the red pill because it did not start overnight. Like I said, all this did not just start. It was something that triggered us to get to this stage. So every action was a reaction, right? So if you look at as far back as the 1970s, like I was saying, when the welfare state came in, empowered the women over the men. I mean, this is an American thing, but it doesn't really apply to me as a Nigerian then, but you know that we Nigerians, we tend to copy everything, what we have in Nigeria is basically copied. So that whole situation whereby the men were systematically removed from the, from the family life, and women, the family were put on system support. And over time, with the rise of the feminist movement, where what a man can do, a woman can do better. With time, as time progressed, later down the line, that's where we see this offshoot of the red pill, movement coming out with the manosphere. Then you have things, people like Andrew Tate and the rest of them who have, took that opportunity to sort of cash in or capitalize on the weaker side, if I put it that way, to say. So
I don't even think Andrew Tate is. I shouldn't be, but I'm gonna, because there's three of us now, so
yeah.
A jousty conversation so far. But I don't even think Andrew Tate is red pill. I don't think Andrew Tate is even really. He's kind of manosphere, but I don't even.
That's
think
why I said the manosphere. So when I said the manosphere, that's why I have people like Andrew Tate in that manosphere session. So there are different guys in the manosphere spectrum who capitalized on it. I mean, Kevin Samuels was one of them as well. He was also, there were different dimensions to how they were approaching it, you understand? So going back to that manosphere space, I think the way the world is right now, the way that men are being treated right now, remember, it was not common to talk about men's feelings. If you actually look at it, we didn't talk about men's feelings. We're supposed to, as men, bottle anything that happens to you. If anything happens to you, now man, there was nothing like men's mental health. It wasn't. So all of these incidences led to that collective situation whereby you have men who have become, in my way, vulnerable to things like a manosphere. Men look, like you talked about, being lonely, talked about the dating scene. When you see, because they say an idle mind is a devil's workshop. Most times, a man in this world, I feel like most men, they find value where they don't, when they're not needed, when you don't need a man, when you don't show him that you need his value or you need him to do something, they feel like less of a man. They feel, because when a man feels that he can't add value to a situation or something, he becomes, he starts feeling less of a man. So this situation has created the avenue for spaces like manosphere and the red pill, and to thrive. And that has led down the cultural decay of what we have today, which is now essentially man versus woman, in the modern day world. And that has also affected, even if you go into the dating, if you look at it in the dating aspect as well, that's trickled down to dating. So it's not common to see people who are over the ages of 35, 40, single. I mean, growing up then, I always believed by 30, I've been married before the age of 30, but I was past 30 before I got married, because obviously I also experienced the whole life thing. So you see, so yeah, that's my own take, is that it's something that led us to this particular space, and until we start addressing those issues, we're still not going to. Unfortunately, it's going to be man versus woman, and then that will give the rise to the capitalists to milk off our, should I say, misery, misfortune,
It comes very well nicely into the next question about what real problem does he identify. And Gab, it'll be interesting to hear your own thoughts about this, about what are the actual problems that are being identified by this manosphere phenomenon. What do you think?
So I mean, I've listened to Obi. I'm not quite clear if he's got a position on this matter. Somehow, I think up till this point, I feel as though maybe we're all on the same page. So not much of misalignment. I think that.
Sorry, what position do you have, if you don't mind me asking? Where do you stand in the whole matter, so I can actually grasp what you're saying? What position?
I think I did say that at the start, which is that feminists look at, they describe many issues which are related to women, which they consider as oppressive, and they look at men perhaps as the source of their problems, and therefore they blame men for the oppression that women suffer. And in the same way, the manosphere and I think the red pill, they take the opposite position, which is that things have changed in society and men are now being sidelined, and men are being oppressed by women. So I think my own assessment is that the issues that they describe are real, but they are misplaced in their diagnosis of these issues. I think that you have to look at, you've got to look at what are the material conditions that give rise to this, to the situations that make that have created the situation that they're trying to battle with, and it boils down to me to economics. And I think that's where I'm coming from. I think that the issues are real, but I think that the diagnosis is wrong.
So when you say issues, can you just say like what maybe one or two example of the
Well, you
issues?
can
Like,
give me an example with any issues that you know, like
is
manosphere.
it the issues that the manosphere is
Thank-
causing, the issue that the manosphere is causing to women, or with the issues that a patriarchal society is causing to women? Like what kind of issues? Because
so
I'm
so
just
so
trying
with,
to narrow
yes.
it down.
So I, whichever camp you are talking about. So if we take, let's say, feminists, for instance, they might say that the issues are patriarchy and women do not have the same opportunities as men. And men go to work, but when they come back home, they still have to do the work that men will not do, right? And career opportunities, are not available to them in the same way as they are to men. So my argument is, I think,
But is this are they blaming the patriarchal societies for this, or are they blaming the manosphere for this? Because it's been proven a lot of these issues that they've mentioned have been debunked, like the whole wage gaps situation, a pay gap situation whereby men, and they claim that men earn more than women doing the same job. That's been debunked. If you look at the football industry, where they say that the women's football should get equally paid. The men's football, even though they don't pull in the number of things like that. So a lot of these things have been debunked. So I'm trying to understand if they still believe that this manosphere, or this set of modern men that are lost because of feminism, are the cause of the issues that they're experiencing.
yeah. So no, I think if you speak to a feminist, they might tell you themselves who they think is to
A
be blamed,
feminist. What is a feminist?
right? So in the same way,
Who
if
is
you are thinking about manosphere, the impression I get is that men now, the men in manosphere believe that, or those who subscribe to that ideology would say that men have become weakened. And is that how you understand it? I don't know whether you have a position on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, but that's also part of the whole. I mean, this whole podcast segment. I mean, sorry, that's all part of the plot for this particular segment. Have men become weaker because of? I think manosphere existed because men have become weaker. That's what gave the rise to manosphere. Because if men were not becoming weak and still maintain their position in the society, regardless of the external forces or whatever that's trying to make them lose their masculinity, I don't think there will be space. I mean, if there was no sickness, there wouldn't be the medicine man selling some form of cure, right? Am I right? So yeah, I
Maybe
believe.
my question, I'll change the question a little bit and just
Yeah.
move it to what are the problems that the manosphere actually identifies? What are the actual problems? In my view, there's a couple of problems. One of the issues is you look at things like Supergirl. It was a movie that came out last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago. Nobody watched it, but Supergirl
I didn't
was
even know there
pushed.
was a movie called Supergirl that came out.
And exactly, because
I just saw
again,
it on
you're
the
not going to
news.
watch it. But if you check, you'll see this, and then with a fairly significant um uh with a fairly significant budget, they were unable to get people to go in there to watch it because Supergirl was touted as a boss babe, very strong, independent woman who didn't need no man, didn't need any support from anything, went off and did her own thing. She was an alcoholic who didn't care about who she could be. During the actual interviews that they were having in on the Hollywood Walk, she was putting herself out there and saying, well, women don't need to be, they don't need to aspire to be anything, that they can just be who they are. And that was what it was. And I've come to the point where I'm looking at this. I personally look at these conversations and I see a world where men are looked at as secondary, less than, and then the women are required to be, and this is quite interesting in terms of the world, the world that we're existing, and the words that are being used as well, that the men are required to force themselves to become something. You need to accept these, this new tropes that are being put across to you. This is not necessarily my own viewpoint. This is my understanding of what's happening now. I'm looking at my assessment. But men are required to accept these things. There's a new boss babe girl that's in the world right now, and you need to accept that. That's what you need to have. You shouldn't want to have a woman who is traditional in any manner or any facet. It's just completely unacceptable. How dare you look at the traditional people, the people who are mothers or grandmothers, etc. It's like, how dare you? That's completely unacceptable. You can't have that. And it's like, well, okay, whoa. I can understand preferences and aspects about, well, okay, maybe not everybody wants that. But if you're now making that seem like it's undesirable, when the reality is, in my view, it's desirable to the vast majority of men. What are we talking about? And this is the thing that I'm talking. When I look at the ticker that's going across the bottom, what real problems does it identify? I think the real problems I identifies for me is that it identifies the issue that we have where women are required to be men in today's world, and then men are required to be women in today's world, or they're being asked to. And it's in my view, it's one of those things where it's like, well, okay, is there anything wrong with holding on to traditional roles? And is there anything wrong with going with more modern roles? I don't know where that cut is, but something isn't working. It's not working when we're doing the more modern versions. We're getting to the issues around loneliness, issues around rejection, the dating frustrations that are happening with people right now in the current modern world. Males are losing their purpose because we are generally, as men, not me, both of you in this call, because we are where we are. The issues that are happening there are causing challenges and issues. But at the same time, they're also saying men should change to these new expectations around what they should be, very soft, very feminine, etc. And then how do we handle and navigate these conversations? Open up the floor. Obi, what do you think?
Yeah, so man, you've just opened up a can of worms there, but that's fine. I'll be chicken. I will pick
That's the
on
point of the conversation, right?
that's the pro. That's it. That's why I said I have my glasses on, because it's a very touchy subject. You understand? So
Yep.
let's forget the whole. Let me just forget Red Pill and what happened in 1978 and how we got here. That Manosphere. Let me focus on Manosphere, because I know the term Manosphere is being used loosely, but we all know what Manosphere is, and it's just basically uh, uh, uh,
I
space
can't
that's
wait to
trying
get
to
Jab, by the way.
identify men's
Very
problem.
go on. But Jab has got a
So
very interesting face, but go on.
yeah, so you asked if you said that one of the things I wanted to answer. You said the issues or the common problems that has been identified by the Manosphere. So the Manosphere to me is actually a good thing, because they've identified mental health in men. Men's mental health is not being talked about. Is now being talked about more often thanks to the Manosphere. If you look at the family court system and custody system, the Manosphere has identified the problem, with those particular set of systems. If you look at the challenges that, boys face in education, such as performance, girls are generally performing better than boys in school nowadays and things like that. If you also look at things like false accusations and rape cases and all those things, we know that manosphere started calling it out and helping men. If you also think about economic pressures as well, like, a man has to work, for you to be a man. If you put the economic pressure and translate that into the dating, you have to be 6 foot tall, you have to make over 100 grand a year, you have to drive a fast car, you have to be James Bond in Patrick, what's his name? This guy in the daytime and Batman at night, Batman at daytime and Batman at nighttime. You understand? So all of these things the manosphere has identified. So basically, and the thing there is, we know we live in a computer age, in a digital age, so you have to understand that wherever there is chaos, there are some people somewhere fueling that chaos, because they're making, let's just have that at the back of our mind, you see. So in short, the manosphere draws attention to multiple issues facing men's health. But now, if you think about the proposed solution, causes and solutions, there's a variance of opinions. Many people have a variance. Some people could say, oh, that's the patriarchy, or some people could say, oh, that's the feminist movement that started it, and things like that. So for that, diagnosis or distraction part that I wanted to say, I just think is a distraction. In my own opinion, I think is a distraction, because if you look at where the world is now, and where you say they're trying to make men feminist, a bit feminine and things like that, it boils down to so many places. It's not just the women trying to become. Remember, they said something about breaking up the family unit, trying to get the man out of the house. The woman out of the house as well, to go and work. If you put it down to the government, trying to tax two family, I think they say it's more productive to tax two people in one household than to tax one household. So there are also those factors that I feel that are socially engineered to bring us to this point where we are, because we cannot just say one thing and not identify the other. You understand what I'm trying to say? Like, there is a reason as to why we are where we are. So I'm just going to leave it for now and let Jabs kick in, so that I don't take up too much time. But
before you go into Jab, so there's a couple of things I want to just throw in. Young people and I'll start with the UK, and we can talk about Nigeria, because the Nigerian aspect is also even.
I like to, and again, sorry to say, I like to also, I hope it's not too bad, I like to tie my references to Nigeria. That's because that's where my main
fine.
This thing is. Yeah,
it's fine, 100% fine. That's perfectly fine. Anytime, if you're free to have those, any conversations that you want to have to any data source. But when we look at even in the UK, and I'll move this to Nigeria as well, is that in the UK already, 33% of people in the UK, I don't know if we're aware of this, live with their parents. 33% of men between the ages of 20 and 34 live with their parents. That's crazy, because independence dating marriage, 33%, easily 33%, slightly higher.
Wow.
33% of people, of live with their parents. Loneliness, again, it's not a joke. It's 31% of men, of adults even, because this crosses across men and women, report feeling lonely between the ages of 16 and 30 as well. This is one of the NHS England's reports around their health surveys that they've done.
And all these girls go to farm for outside, then they're lonely.
They're gonna do shaka.
They farm anyhow.
No, oh my God, don't talk to me. Oh my God. It's like, no. 31% of people are still reporting feeling lonely. You know what I mean? And Jab, were you about to say something?
Yeah. No, you carry on.
Yeah, that's fine. And then the manosphere concept, and this involves, and this is the thing I'm going to go back to, and I really need to talk about this aspect of people talk about the manosphere. I'm not manospheric. I'm not red pill. If you look at, well, depending on who's asking those questions, someone will say, "Oh, you're red pill because," but I'm a truth person, and I look at the world as the world exists, and the world is currently not very favorable to men. I'll be very honest; it's just not. We're required to do certain things. We're required to be certain things. we have a role and responsibility, and we don't necessarily, as a result, get what we need to get back out of the world. The world doesn't give us anything, and it's never given us anything because we're men. But somehow, in the middle of this, we've started getting it confused around what are the expectations of men? Who should we be? How should we be? But somehow, I've been getting the idea through my research or through my experience of life, etc., that it's not very clear what men should be anymore. Even though it's clear what the expectations of the outcomes of men should be, we should still be protectors, we should still be providers. We have a very specific role. What does this have to do with the capitalistic society around the world? Now, I'm going to come back to your point, Jab, that you started in the beginning. I think that to a large extent, most of what's happening is not based off of capitalism in a direct fashion. It's based off of economics in an indirect fashion. Men are always required to provide. What provision requires depends on the economic system, and it depends on the society. It changes depending on where you are. So if you're in a different situation in, I don't know, let me just pick in communism, for example, you're expected to provide, but you're expected to provide in a different way. In capitalism, you're expected to provide in a capitalistic way, which is fine. You do the things that you need to do as a man, and you make sure that you're providing the things you need to provide as a man within your socio-economic or your socio-political situation in which that you exist. It doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, you as a man are required to provide, period. It doesn't change that. What's happening current in modernity is that people are telling men that you don't need to be a man. And I'm going to break a couple of, going to shake the tables here. I don't even know if those tables apply in Nigeria because we are where we are. But we're in Nigeria, we don't even care. In Nigeria, the reality is whether you're a man, there's no man, woman, gender changing, any of that stuff. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing to us back there. Doesn't mean it's not a real thing in other societies or other cultures. But we have a situation in which, even though you are, no, regardless of what it is, biologically, if you're a man, you're expected to do certain things. If you have XX chromosomes, you are allowed certain provisions. If you're XY chromosomes, you are allowed certain provisions. And I think that we've got to the point where we're not really fully understanding what the implications of that are. We try to pretend that it doesn't matter what your gender is. We try to pretend that it doesn't matter what your sex is. We try to pretend that it doesn't matter what it is that you're contributing as that individual with the responsibilities that you have. But we have those responsibilities. We have those expectations off of society. And we do. What do we do about that? Do we end them? Do we change them? Or do we accept them? And I think that's the part that I'm quite interested to hear what everybody else thinks about this one.
Right. So I don't know that there is. I mean, you haven't said a lot of controversial things just yet. It looks like everybody's kind of refusing to be controversial, which is fine. But let me put it this way. So, in what many might perceive as the traditional roles, traditional gender roles, the man is meant to be the head of the house and he provides, the breadwinner, and the woman is meant to be the person who cares for the home and looks after children and the nurturer, right? So, but what you will find is if you go back, let's even take the UK now. Just go back to post World War, right? Just go back like 70, 80 years ago. right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have a guy who is how, let's just take house price, one index. Take house prices, for instance, the average pay compared to the average house price is probably
Mm-hmm.
maybe a factor of three, right?
Yep.
So average house price is like times three, the average house average pay. Yeah. So,
Or
but what
yeah.
is it? What is it now? I think I reckon now is going to be a lot more than that.
Yep.
And earlier you said that about 30%. I didn't know it was that high. About 30% of men are living with their parents. Well, it's not a surprise. We know that that is true. And
Mm-hmm.
people talk about the bank of mom and dad because children, guys, boys and girls, or young men and women go to uni, they study, they finish, they have massive debt, right?
Yep.
They, if they're lucky and they get a job that is relevant to what they studied, great. Otherwise, you will find many people who would go and end up working in serving at the at the bar whilst looking for something more substantive. So
Mm-hmm.
they can't afford a house, therefore they stay at home with their parents, and that can go on for another 5, 10 years or whatever, right?
Yep.
So for that reason also, they're thinking, well, if we get married, how am I going to then look after my kids and all that kind of thing? So people are getting married later, people are having children later. All of these are economic factors. It's not because of evil women or men, as the case may be. It's the economic factors that bring about these things. So then you have a lot of loneliness, and it accounts for some of the mental health issues that we see. The anxiety, the depression, people being out of work,
Mm-hmm.
um, and and so I think it's more productive, I think, to look at the economic factors as the basis for some of these changes that feminists and the people in Manosphere kind of discuss, because it's not that men are evil or women are evil. In the case of feminists, I can kind of see where they're coming from, because they may look at that and say, well, it's a patriarchal society, it's men who've always ruled and all that sort of thing. But if you can look beyond that a bit, and you would come to the point that to the realization that actually it's economic factors. It's like saying I'm going to blame men for the transatlantic slavery, or I'm going to
Mm.
blame men for colonialism because men were the people in charge. It's
Mm-hmm.
I can understand why patriarchy is like the surrogate for this sort of thing, but the underlying basis I'm arguing or proposing is economics. Happy to expound some more, but that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Obi, thoughts?
Right. You see, this topic is very touchy for me, and I don't want to be hated by people against me because I have a lot of. You see, first of all, you mentioned economic factors, right? What are these economic factors we are talking about? Who is responsible for implementing or bringing in these economic factors? How did we get from a house to buy a house or to feed a family of three in 1960 or 1975? Let's use you can use $150 to feed a family of three for a month, or less than 50. What am I even say? Like maybe $20 to feed a family of three in 1970. Fast forward to maybe 1990, you need probably maybe $100 to feed a family of three. You understand? So how did we get from there to there? These socio-economic factors you're talking about, this still boils down to what I'm trying to say. My point that I said there's always that small subset of people that make money that are milking from the chaotic situation that is occurring on the surface. It's not, it's more than meets the eyes, because in my own opinion, or my belief, I believe that women,
Let me interrupt you for a second, Obi. Let me interrupt you for a second, just to give a, you know,
maybe you just saved me from saying something that
no, no,
women are the cause of why we are where we are. That's part of the statement.
so,
That's
so,
Oh, that's part of the topic. So
okay.
okay, yeah, go
So,
on.
and that's what I'm
so,
saying, because that is misplaced. So if again, if just go back to, like, I don't know, 1950, 1960, 1970, in fact, even 1970, right? You could have a guy who is, let's say, a lorry driver, right? Who would have 5, 6 children, who would do maybe work, I don't know, 5 or 6 days a week type of thing, but on their salary alone, wife not working, wife looking after kids, can afford a mortgage, can look after the kids, right? And I mean, those were days when universities were free. You didn't pay a dime. Now, you've got to pay. The UK is becoming a bit like Nigeria. You have to pay school fees now. And there are so many now university degrees that you finish, you can't get a job with it. They've like, commodified university degrees, and you kind of think some of these degrees, you think, why are people studying it? But again, it's the capitalist system, because the whole idea really is about profits, right? So you look at the universities and you look at, like, the dependent on foreign students, because they subsidize the education system that they have. So if you're paying 10K, a foreign student has to pay 2 or 3 times of that. That's 20, 30K. And if economic factors become unfavorable, like they've been recently in Nigeria, these students stop coming. Plus, the whole thing about, oh, we don't like foreigners, they are the cause of our problems and that sort of thing. And so you bring all this, you restrict the visa system. Suddenly, UK universities are waking up and thinking, good griefs, we haven't got the funds. So how are we going to maintain? And also, when they did have the funds, a lot of them were just sort of like building all these fanciful buildings and all those kind of, business and all of those things. So economics is really very important. I am interested to hear how women are responsible for these changes that you're talking about, Obi.
right. So, well, when I say women, I don't mean all women before this. No, I'm not saying women, the whole of every 100% women are the ones responsible for it. But you must understand that when there's an avenue for, would I say, capitalism, or some audience of people to milk a situation, they always uh, tend to focus on the woman first. For example, when they wanted to get the black man out of the house, it was the woman that they came to. And I don't know if you're Christian or Muslim. Remember, if you go by the Bible, when devil wanted to tempt Adam and Eve, it was Eve that the devil went to first to tell to eat the. I mean, Akatu will be very familiar with this verse. So right from time we know that women. I'm not saying that doesn't make them the weakest.
Jab is very familiar with the religious.
You know, I'm not saying that makes them the weakest. And for the records, I would like to point out that we as Africans, we never believed that women were the weaker versions. That was strictly, we never subjugated women in Africa, especially in Nigeria, where I come from as an Igbo, because there was a colonialistic mentality, or colonialism brought that mentality that women were the weaker versions. I mean, if you come to the Igbo, if you've heard of what they call the Umuada community, those people, they can make you, they can break you. So women have never been weak where we come from. So what I'm talking about, I'm saying this purely from a Nigerian perspective. I'm not talking about the European or the Western world, but we know that for the Western world now, they set the rules for the playground where the rest of the world follows. In as much as we want to deny that fact, everybody copies what the West is doing. That's why we speak in English as our official language, even though it came through colonialism. And if you look at other countries like the Far East, China and Russia, somehow they're still, a bit westernized in their ways and their thinking. as opposed to Africans who actually
Yeah,
copy everything.
it's a
So
global capitalist system.
yeah,
But
yeah.
so you mentioned that men are kicked out of the house. What do you mean by that?
No, as I said that if we go back to the 1970s, to the creation of the welfare state in America, where there was a ploy to get the men out of the house, where the government came to the women and said to them that if they will get government assistance if the men left the house, that gave a rise to single motherhood. Are you not familiar with this research? That's what gave rise to single motherhood in America at some point, where the women was. There was even an interview I saw on YouTube one time. Was a confirmed interview where she said that they don't need no, I don't need no man, and then the man, and the government just give me the money, and that's how it went. Because but the men were of the opposite sense, that they need their woman. As a matter of fact, I've never heard a man say I don't need a woman. It was just a fairly recent thing. I mean, we all know the whole monarchy, men are dogs, men are this, I don't need no man. I can do for myself what a man can do, a woman can do. We are all familiar with this. Even as a Nigerian growing up, I was always rebellious. They said a happy wife is a happy home. I said, man, burn that shit. It's a happy man, happy wife. All of us have to be happy. Nobody's happiness is above it. That has always been my mentality. But a lot of Nigerians grew up thinking that. That's why we have a high number of simps, Nigerian men that are simps that can't chase women without money. If you remove money from that, their Nigerian men have no game. I'm sorry to say this, but let's go back to, let's not, before I divert from the topic, women, for me, not with the whole, we can look at this from the biology aspect. Women are nurturers. This is biology has proven that they nurture, they are more caring, they have more compassion and things like that. Not to say that they are not the women who are not nurturing, but majority makes the rule, exceptions don't make the rule. So it's, if you want to get someone to do something, say if you want to get a man and a woman to do something, it's easier to appeal to the woman. That's why women are the higher spenders when you go into the spending industry and things like that. So when I say that the women were responsible in a way, yes, they were responsible in a way that they let themselves not, get talked into believing that they are being oppressed by the patriarchy. Because without the patriarchy, we would not have this world that we have, that even the women are enjoying, or that they feel safe in. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure that if any woman had an issue with a break-in, she would want a police officer, a male police officer, to attend to her, as opposed to, I'm not saying that the female police officer is not equally yoked, but if we're being honest to ourselves. So in answer to your question, it's not just solely the women that are responsible, because like I said, the men allow themselves to get weak, and where you have a subset of weak men, that brings the opportunity for various things to come in, like things like the Manosphere, people coming to sell self-improvement products to you and
So
all that.
how did men allow themselves to be weak? What do you think made men weak?
Well, men are human beings to begin with, and we all know that everyone has his limit. Everything has its limit, and when they become weak, I don't necessarily mean weak as in strength, physical power, or strength is weak. I'm talking about becoming weak in terms of your as a man, in terms of how they control their self, their emotions as a man, because we were all growing up, we're all taught that men shouldn't cry, or men shouldn't feel any sort of sadness or weakness. That's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about allowing them to get to you where you believe that your value as a man determines on what you bring, how much you're making, how tall you are, how fit you are. I mean, fitness is a big part of it, but how much how, like I said, how much you're racking in, or what your societal status, your status in society. Because if men did not allow themselves to be weak, they would rise beyond this. And once the female started seeing that men were weak, or once it became common to see men being weak in this aspect, that gave rise to what we have today, where you have women demanding all sorts. I mean, it's not common to see a girl who is 5'4" looking for a guy who is 6 foot plus, or you see a girl who earns 40K a year looking for a man who earns 100K a year, even though the average salary for a man in this country is 45 grand a year. You understand what I'm saying? So these are the things when it's in, and again, I can see the reason why it's not everyone that would be out as spoken as I am, or have that mind to say. I know how I talk to. I mean, if I chat to a girl who is looking for a 6'4" man, after talking to me, I don't think they want to ever talk to any other man in their life again, because I try to set them straight in that point, like, how tall are you? But you get men who just look at you and just overlook it and move ahead, and or that's where that also gave a birth to the rise of simps. You see men who try to buy the woman's love now with money. Who feels that, oh, even if I'm not this or I'm not that tall, as long as I have this, and that causes problems for other men down the line, because majority of women have
maybe we could talk about the existence of sims. What what do we think has led to this situation where there are men out there now who are willing to pay for attention from women? What could have happened?
That's the weakness we're talking about.
Yeah.
Jobs.
So I don't think that it's a term that I'm familiar with. So you're asking, why do men pay to get women's
Why
attention?
are men in a situation where, because the whole situation that we have is that men, a lot of men, are in the position where they are paying for attention. They are losing control.
Let me break it down for you. Sorry. So a simp
Go for
is
it.
someone who shows excessive attention, sympathy, or deference to another person, usually a romantic interest. So the label implies the person is trying too hard to win affection, often by sacrificing their dignity, self-respect, or money to show someone who does not reciprocate their feelings.
Correct.
Basically, Nigerian men.
Soccer idealizing mediocre P. That's a summary.
So this is a man who is trying to win the affection of a woman, and he'll go out of his way, maybe perhaps
Correct.
spend all his money,
Sacrificing their self-respect.
and the woman
Yes.
isn't.
Sacrificing everything.
Everything.
I think the issue is more about we have quite a lot of men now, and this is the part
Is
it
that
comes
because
back into the Marxist.
is that because they perceive the woman to be socioeconomically better off than them? Is that why?
No,
And
available, because a lot of these men don't have any options, so they take what's available. That's what they have, and that's what,
what do you
not
mean
even
by
just that's what they have.
what do
That's
you
what
mean
they
by what's
think.
available?
It's what they think that they have that's available to them, whether it's through subscriptions or whether it's through conversations, etc. The main aim for most of these men is to have a relationship with somebody, but they can't. And then either through the chatters or whatever it is that all these people are doing these days, they're able to have a conversation or have a relationship with that person.
So no, I don't know much about this.
Neither do I.
No,
I
no,
know
I
enough to be able
I
to just have a
genuinely don't.
conversation about it at a high level. But
Yeah, no, I don't know much about it. But I mean, if you're asking why do humans act in strange ways when they're besotted, I think that I don't know. I think that's just, I would imagine that that is something that's always happened, which is that you might see someone that you fancy who doesn't fancy you, and so you keep trying, or other people might decide I'll go somewhere else. I think I'm not sure that that is. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think is the reason for that. And I mean, what do you guys think is the reason?
So the thing there about this whole same thing is basically they say it's men paying for women that don't want them, and that's different from being because they say a high value man, or if you talk about the qualities of a man or a high value man or whatever they term it, is that a man pays for all the bills, he takes care of all the bills in the household for himself and the woman, and looks after all her financial needs. And that doesn't make that man a simp, because here there are two different. You have to distinguish between the two of them, because basically a simp is someone who just cannot do without having to pay his way or sacrifice his dignity, and is giving a rise to that, whereby because of this loneliness we're talking about. But that's really a small issue of the problem. That's a small part of the problem. It's not really a big. Let's not get too carried away with that whole simp thing. If you don't, I mean, it's not really. It's just a small part. So don't bother yourself too much about it. In my opinion. Akatu, what do you think? Okay, what do you think? It's not enough to. Let's not misalign. I mean, it's misaligned, but
Yeah.
if you carry on here.
Go on. Okay, go
No,
on.
no, I'm finished. I was saying.
I thought you wanted to. I think
Akatu, are you speaking?
he's on mute. We can see you,
Can you
but
hear
I think
me?
you're on mute.
Hello?
Yeah. I can hear you now.
All
Where are you
right.
speaking?
You guys just
You're-
glitched out. So I can hear it now. What did you say? Sorry, Jab.
No, I thought you wanted to say something.
Well, I mean, no, not really.
Okay. So I think the other thing I wanted to say was that, again, this will come down to capitalism. So remember the feminist movement, we want men and women to work. What a man can do, a woman can do, better.
Mhm.
And let's allow women into the labor force to expand, because remember what time we were using children, and then
Can't hear
because
you.
we were using children for child labor, we're making them go into mines that rich, all of those. So we expanded the workforce, we allowed them to work, and that was great for some time. But we are now at a point where men and women have no choice than actually to work. So you could have, two people earning, and even their combined income still doesn't put them in a place where they might, let's say, get a mortgage and get married on time and have children on time, for all of those things that we're talking about. So it's to the point where there is no choice than for them to work. It's no longer the situation where one person works and then can provide for the family. It's actually that both of them have to work to be able to afford for the for the family. And if they have a child, then they have to pay to put the child in school, in nursery and all of those things. You're only allowed, I can't remember whether it's 20 hours a week or 20 or 30 hours a week or so. So if you work beyond that, you're going to have to pay to be able to work more than those hours. And people maybe who have family close by who can help with child support can maybe get away with that, right? And it's also the reason, I think, why some families may decide that actually it's pointless for my wife or my husband to work, because it's just not, I make less than I spend on childcare. So again, it all comes back to the economics. And if you understand that, you can start to see why men and women fight each other. What they are experiencing is real, but we've got this narrative which is being created and curated to create confusion and to make them enemies of each other and to fight. It's divide and rule tactic, right? And whether you look at feminism, manosphere, you talk about like all the culture wars, racism. We've got the racist, anti-racist, brigade. We've got LGBTQI on this, on this side. All of these different culture wars are created and curated so as to divide the workers, because if they understand that they have a common interest, their power and their agitation and their organization will bring about a change in the system, a material change in their condition. But if you distract them and you give them reasons to keep fighting each other and to just completely distract them, then the system perpetuates itself. And so it creates more and more and more divisions. So you always have to go back to the material conditions of the people because it explains a lot.
So, quick one. So, what I agree with what Jabs has said. Everything Jabs said actually makes sense. And in what you just said, you've touched at the underlying cause of why we're here, because we just didn't get to where we are, where it became man versus woman. It's something you mentioned about the system. You said that word, the system. Who is this system? That word system, there's racism inside that system. There's also the gender wars is all being well curated and being put there, and is acting and is delivering what it's supposed to deliver, because what that system wants is that man versus woman that we have now. That is what the system wants, because the system profits off the back of man versus woman. When everything goes up, the man has to go out and earn, the woman has to go out and earn. If a man is making 60 grand a year and a woman is making 60 grand a year and they're paying 20% tax, that's 40% more tax to who? That system. This is the thing that the human beings have not been able to realize. That's why I say we are all weak, in a sense that if we allow ourselves to be played by that system, which goes back to the red pill, blue pill, matrix, the bigger picture. It's like I said, it's a whole big bubble that we have to dissect individually. And that's where the thing comes, propaganda. Because I believe all of this starts off as a propaganda. Oh, man, the woman is being oppressed. Or let's push this propaganda. That's where the media comes in. It pushes propaganda to try to get people all fighting against one another. So, and I think that we as human beings, remember, there's a saying that says we don't use up to 5% of our brains. And if we're not using up to 5% of our brains, I don't think we're going to have that ability to see through that propaganda, because like I said, it would take a lot for someone to see beyond the physical, the flesh, to be spiritually aligned, because we are not spiritually aligned. I know it sounds like I'm just giving so many cacophony, but we're not. It's one thing. That's how this topic goes, because everyone is always focusing on that man versus woman stuff. But remember, it wasn't always man versus woman. If you think about it, back in the days, women have always been in positions of power from time, trying to make us believe that all of a sudden women just lost that position. And and that boils down to what I said about women being easy to manipulate. I'm sorry. Women are the easier one to manipulate when you want to.
Okay. So I think you're making very good points up till this point. No, I won't say that women are easier to.
Between a man and a woman, between the two genders, come on, Jabs.
I don't think it has any gender.
I know they fear cancellation because you don't get anything where they want cancel. I don't get anything for them to cancel.
We're not trying to cancel. I think
for me, though.
I think that, you can. So I think I agree with you about propaganda and the creation of narratives, right? Because I think many of us think that we are very objective and we're very objective thinkers, and my truth is my truth, and my truth is the truth. But you know, Carl, I think, is it Karl Marx or Engels? One of them said that the the dominant ideology, right, in a society, or the dominant ideas in a society, are the ideas of the ruling class, right? So, and and that is because it's important to be able to control, for the few to control the many without taking a whip and beating them and flogging them or getting chains or getting a gun and forcing them to do that. You need to be able to control people's minds and people's thinking. So that's what you do in schools. That's what you do through the media. Through textbooks, through billboards, through basically everything. The whole society. It's all about how you control information. And so when somebody is saying something to you, always have to ask, who is saying this? Why are they saying this? Who stands to gain? And when you analyze the world like that, it's everything makes sense. There's always a reason why things happen, or why things are, why you allow, why some information is allowed, is released, if I can put it that way. So our education system themselves are also ways of indoctrinating, people. It's not just North Korea and China and the Chinese who indoctrinate their children. That's what we all do. And the whole purpose of going to school is to get people to think in the same way, to have the same shared values. Well, what are those values? Those values didn't descend from heaven or anything of that nature. People made them up, people created them. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And it's not just females. It's nothing to do with gender or anything of that nature. I think if you are born into a society, you will imbibe the values of that society and the cultures of that society. It's kind of what it's there for. But I think as people who become wise and educated, it's always good to ask, where is this coming from? What purpose does it serve? And I think what I find very helpful is always question look at the material conditions of people. Sorry, Obi.
But we know that human beings lack the capacity, majority of human beings lack the capacity for critical thinking. Majority of human beings do not. No. Okay, sorry. Let me rephrase that. Let me rephrase that. Not lack the capacity, but refuse to apply that critical reasoning to major. Because if, like what you said, when you made a statement that when someone, when they push a propaganda or something, is said that we need to ask who is saying this, who stands to gain. Do you think that if, say, 50% of the world population as human beings, or where we ask these questions, do you think that the world is actually going to be where we are now, where we're having this conversation? Do you genuinely believe that if we are, because this is critical, this what you just said now is critical reasoning. That's my opinion. Do you think that if 50% of human beings ask these questions? I'll give you an example. We look at COVID. We all know that COVID, some people say COVID is a hoax, the vaccine and this, if you didn't get vaccinated. I don't really know about that COVID thing. But one thing I know is that there is no way you can manufacture a vaccine in 6 months. History has shown that you're a medical doctor, I believe, Jabs, you're a medical doctor, right? So this is more in your field. And we've had all the whole conspiracy theories about COVID or what happened during the lockdown. People are not asking questions. And my own opinion or my own belief was that, yes, there might have been COVID. There was COVID. There was a virus called COVID. But the way they went about it, there was more than COVID. They didn't let us know the full intricate details of what was going on, because they said, oh, stay in your house, wear a mask, and you're protected, of which the studies have shown that that face mask that we're wearing was not really doing jack shit. But yet people still followed that whole thing, because I believe if they come tomorrow and they say to you there's a virus in the air, and if you're standing above 5'5", that's anything beneath 5'5", you won't catch that virus. I'm 100% sure that majority of the population will go out and start ducking and walking, thinking that the virus is only in the air. That's what I'm saying. Do we actually, as human beings, apply this critical reasoning, which is asking these questions like, who is saying this? Why are they saying this? Why do we need to do this? If we are doing that, do you think that we're going to be where we are now as a race?
So I think you raise very good questions, and I think that this is something that we can maybe even look at in further podcasts. But again, it goes back to that point I was making to you earlier. So I mean, if you and I can figure this out and we're using our brains, right? Other humans can also do that. But it's again that
no, they can't. They can't. Not everybody, because you're giving
let me learn. I think there is no question about it that humans are the product of what they consume. And like I said, if you are born into think about the culture shock you had when you moved from Nigeria here, and same culture shock if somebody moved from here, let's say to Japan or to the Amazon, right? It's because in that society there's a way of doing things and there's a way of thinking, right? And that is, I'm going to argue that is itself a form of indoctrination or acculturation, indoctrination, acculturation, whatever you want to call it. But remember what I said earlier, which is that the dominant ideas or ideology of society are those of the ruling class. The ruling class want a particular outcome and they want a particular society. So they will allow certain ideas to become entrenched in that society, and some ideas that they don't want, particularly those that would counter their interest, they are going to try and do everything to suppress it or destroy it, if you see where I'm coming from, right? Mm-hmm. So if you grow up in that society, humans in general have, it's the herd instinct, which is that you're quite comfortable in a group. If everybody thinks the same as you, there is some safety or sense of safety in that sort of group. I'll give you an example. Let's say religion. Okay, now billions of people around the world believe that there is a man or a being, in the sky who watches out for you, and he created the world and all of those things. So it's a belief. You can't prove it. And in fact, arguing with maybe somebody who holds that belief and trying to prove to them that is wrong is pointless, because it's a belief, right? You can't prove it. And
Gents, if I may just pop in, closing arguments, closing conversations now, because we've been here for about an hour and 24 minutes.
Really?
So if yes, really, I know I know this is how it goes. We'll be here, we'll just be going, and it's just three of us. I've not even been engaging in this conversation. I've let you both go. So if you can give your closing arguments, that'll be quite interesting. Jab, go for yours.
Yeah, so my closing argument is Manosphere, feminism, toxic masculinity. The points they make, the arguments that they make are real. We understand the issues that they're talking about, but they make the wrong diagnosis. They blame the wrong people. And to understand the issues that they talk about or what brings them about, you have to go back to economics. And that is where the answer lies. And I'd argue that the issues are caused by capitalism. And if you understand that, then you would also understand why it's a culture war.
Yep.
And what that does is that it divides people, and it creates so much division and distraction, and in doing that, it helps capitalism to entrench itself, and the issues just keep getting worse. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think what Jobs has summed it up perfectly well, because when you talk about the ruling class, in my own opinion or in my own belief, that's the system we're talking about. The ruling class is the system. And I believe Karl Marx has said that the ruling class consists of those who own the means of production in a capitalist society. They exercise cultural and political harmony to establish a dominant ideology. Basically, they are in power, and I don't think anyone who is in power would like to let go of that power. Hence, why their ideology is dominant. So, because that's trickled down to where we've got things like the manosphere, feminism, red pill all coming out. And what Jobs said, I agree 100, is that these are all socio-economic things that have been put in place to sort of distract the people. Because if you remember, the one of the segments heading here was something about diagnosis or distraction. It's a distraction whereby the ruling class are consolidating power. Like I said, in the midst of chaos, there is always someone somewhere who's benefiting. If you look at the history of how wars have always been financed and fought, you hear the story of the Rothschild, how they financed the war, and all those conspiracy theory story and stuff like that. So we are just subjects of these ruling class, in my opinion, because we are here fighting man versus woman, or we're saying, I'm not going to get married. Meanwhile, the ruling class, they are all getting married. Their children are married, their kids are marrying each other, consolidating power, putting themselves in position of power. Meanwhile, me and you, we are here trying to argue. This girl is saying she wants 6 foot tall man. She needs 100K. Yeah, I need 40K. Then you see the Nigerian ones, we never know where their future they face under Tinubu. They are looking for money to buy wig. They are looking for man that is going to give them the life that their father cannot give them. Or you see the Nigerian man there who is thinking of how he's going to thief money or steal money to oppress his next. So these are what we see is is expected, or the babies or the product of the ruling class putting in, consolidating power. That's just how I see it. There's no all this other manosphere, yada things is not really is a distraction. And that boils down to why I said that human beings, we have the capacity, but we don't use it to do that critical thinking. Because I've thought about it, I analyzed it, I've seen that, man, this manosphere, yes, it's identified some of the problems plaguing some of the problem plaguing men in general in the society. But at the same time, is he identifying it and is he solving it? Because I don't think he's really solving anything to an extent, but other than creating that more deeper divide where we're just going down a rabbit hole where I did not even know that loneliness is it loneliness or something? He said it was about 30% or 60% of the females reported being single. Mate, I did not know this. But when you see these shorties outside, they don't even act like they want you to talk to them. It's so for me, yeah, like I said, it's a capitalist world that we live in, and we're just playing their games. The sooner we realize it, I think the better it will be for everyone. So,
yeah. No, I think that's a perfect ending to this conversation. Jab, we've had a good one today. It'll be good. Next week, we're going to have Farouk, and we're going to end on the last conversation that we're having about the Nigerian situation around Jackpa and all of that was happening there. But good conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed this one with both of you. Have a fantastic day. Have a fantastic weekend. Mr. Line, signing out.
All right, man. Nice one,
Thank
guys.
you.
Peace out.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to our viewers as well. And see you next week, same time.
See you
Thank
next
you for
week.
joining. See you next week, same time.